Hello ladies and gents, today we're going to be doing a different sort of video. As you can see, it's gameplay in the background as opposed to a different sort of style that I normally go for. For those of you who don't know, I have actually got a sort of like more of a gaming style channel. That's kind of mainly what I do anyway. This is just a thing on the side that I enjoy. And I decided that this week we'd do something interesting and we'd talk about how some of the heroes in For Honor stack up to their real life counterparts and how historically accurate they are. I thought this was a good idea because it can go on both channels. So anyway, we'll get into the Nobushi first of all. Nobushi actually is the Japanese translation for mercenary, and they were kind of it's a bit of an interesting one because the Nobushi were not always women. Most of the time they really weren't, but the For Honor sort of universe has put them in a situation where they were women who were paid to protect villages and things like that while the men were off at war. They were called honor geishas. I believe that's terrible pronunciation from me there, but they wielded the weapon that you can see in the video here, the naginata, which was a sort of like pike style thing with a one-edged blade, like a single-edged blade on the end. And they varied quite a lot, and they were really trained well to use these. It's kind of similar to a katana, the actual blade, like the end of it and the width. And this was mainly due to the fact that the women could sort of handle it with a lot more finesse than the men could. They weren't allowed in the military, which is why I said before they had to kind of stay back and sort of patrol the villages and protect the people in there. They were trained as warriors regardless of the fact that they weren't allowed to go into the military, obviously. And it was kind of interesting that they were just ridiculously badass, basically. Like there was actually one called Nakano Takeko, definitely saying that really badly, and she was a really fierce warrior that's gone down in kind of history for being very dangerous, and she was much to be feared. I think she actually said to one of her friends at some point that if she ever died that she wanted her head cut off so she could be at peace. She was a bit of a nutter. So yeah, that's the Nobushi. Today we're going to be talking about the Conqueror as well. He's an interesting hero because he kind of like delves in and out of the lines of reality and what really happened historically and how accurate it is. A good example of this is that you can obviously see from his style that you'll have seen it before if you've seen the memes or like if you know your history a little bit, in that he kind of originates from the Crusades, and even though they were unsuccessful, the Conqueror was kind of like a really successful warrior at the time. Unfortunately, the Crusades were unsuccessful due to the fact that we were kind of massively outmanned and outgunned. Effectively, they were throwing hand grenades at us while we were trying to shoot them with bows and arrows and stuff. And what basically happened with the Conqueror and things like that is For Honor actually does acknowledge this, to be fair. It's quite good. It's in his lore and everything. But they originated from the Crusades, and they were effectively prisoners who were given a pardon by the Pope if they came and fought for the country. So most of them were kind of weren't great. They were just a bit brutal. They were very brave, at least you could kind of give them that. But what's kind of interesting is that For Honor actually states, and it's kind of cool, that they every once in a while you'd find a diamond in the rough, which is exactly true in the case of the Conqueror. Like sometimes you would get one that did really well. The weapon they used was the flail, it was called. There's loads of different types of flails. You've seen them all throughout history. They're used in France quite a lot, and it was actually originally like a farming tool where it is wooden, but obviously the one the Conqueror most famously used or uses in the game as well is the ball and chain one. It's a really clumsy weapon, and it can kind of do more damage to its wielder than its opponent at times depending on what they're doing. But people who trained with it, some of them were really fierce and really difficult to beat because it's such a difficult weapon to do anything with, especially if you only have a sword. Like if you don't have a shield, you're kind of screwed against the Conqueror for the most part, especially in real life in that situation. There were more than one types, obviously. You had the kind of usual like battering ram style one, the bat style one. It's quite interesting, and as you can see here from the gameplay, like For Honor's done a really good job of making the Conqueror play kind of how you'd have to use that sort of weapon and setup in real life. It's kind of all about being like big, brutal, heavy hits, and there's nothing really fast about this person. If you've got your heavy armor on, you've got your big shield and your massive flail on your ball and chain, the last thing you're going to be thinking about is kind of trying to like outspeed your opponent. It's just not going to happen. So it was quite interesting to see the way they tackled it. Now, in terms of it not being kind of realistic, most of the Conquerors weren't exactly noble men like some of them are in For Honor, and like the one in the story is. A lot of them were people who had been put in prison for horrible things and were just allowed to come out because Europe was kind of desperate for soldiers at that point. So it's it's a difficult one to really sum up. But long story short, the Conqueror was a very, very fierce, very dangerous in battle. As you can tell, I'm rambling a bit now, but I'm just watching this here and seeing that it's it'd been so frightening to come up against this. Like the Nobushi were incredibly skilled and they were incredibly, you know, finessed and smart and stuff. And this is just like, it's just raw brutality, isn't it? Really, like it doesn't almost look like there's any skill or any like ability in it. It's just men who'd done horrible things before, who just were willing to go that sort of extra mile on their opponent most of the time, and that's why they'd win. And he is a very, very brutal hero. And it would have been really interesting at the time to almost be on the battlefield to an extent to see what the what it was like to fight against these people, or you know, or alongside them, because I can't imagine it could have been fun. So anyway, that's been the Conqueror. Really interesting hero to look at, and we'll move on to the next one. So last but certainly not least is the Raider. Now the Raider is debatably one of the most historically accurate heroes in For Honor, other than maybe the Warden, because it's kind of just your sort of bog standard average sort of Viking soldier. Now the Raider was actually more similar to Scandinavian soldiers called Housecarls, which is quite funny because you might recognise a Housecarl from Skyrim, which is what Lydia, one of the companions, was. But effectively what they were is they were effectively like bodyguards for families, and they were kind of treated as one of the family. They were really, really sort of cherished and treasured because they were very, very strong warriors. They were really, really hard to beat, and they were really, really loyal as well. It was really, really important to have one around if you were kind of like a wealthy family back in the day in Scandinavia. They carried the Dane axe, which is, as you can see, the big, brutal, heavy axe that they have, and they became sort of masters at mastering the weight of it and understanding how and when to use the pommel and what you could do with it and to really cause damage. And it was kind of like a surprisingly defensive weapon, even though they played very much on the attack. They were used. It's kind of interesting the way that the weapon worked. It's kind of simple. It's just an axe, really. You know, there was a lot of over the top heavies and stuff like that, which is actually the game uses quite well and does quite often. They actually were around in England in around 1066 to defend King Harold, because they really considered, they were, like I said before, they were really, really prestiged and well esteemed soldiers. You know, they were really, really useful to have around, because they'd kind of just, there wasn't really anything they weren't willing to do. They would kind of go the extra mile, just like the Conquerors would, and it made them an absolute nightmare to fight against. They often tattooed themselves as well with from like relics from previous battles and stuff, which is why you can see in the game that they have tattoos. I didn't actually know that until sort of For Honor was a thing, and then I had to check that out once the game actually came out and everything, because I was really surprised to find out that these people actually did stuff like that and tattooed themselves. That was one of the most interesting things I learned about this in the research for this video, is how many people back in those days still had tattoos and stuff like that. And it was a very, very common thing, especially amongst like Vikings and things like that, because as I said, it was, if you had a lot of tattoos, it kind of spoke more about you than your words could. You know, it's the picture says 1,000 words and everything. I kind of killed this guy really easily, so the footage isn't too long. I do have another game, but I don't think I'll go into it because there's not too much to say about the Raider other than he's fairly simple. If you have enjoyed this video, please make sure to sort of give me some feedback on it, and maybe suggest some other heroes you'd like to see the history of. I know someone was talking to me about the Highlander the other day, because that would be really interesting, because you don't really see much about the Scottish soldiers back in the day and stuff like that, and they've always been really, really fierce, so I think that'd be quite a good one to do. But I could do with 2 more suggestions anyway, so if you have any, feel free to put them down in the comments. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video, and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure that you leave a like and subscribe. Tell me what I did well, tell me what I didn't, so that I can know how to improve my videos in the future. All feedback's really, really good. Constructive's obviously the ideal one, but can't really complain either way. Beggars can't be choosers. Like I said before, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video, and I really, really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to watch some of the other videos on my channel, I'll have a link into the one where I play games and stuff. And of course, obviously, there's a few other videos that I've got on this channel every Tuesday and every Friday. Thank you very much for watching. I've been George, and I'll see you in a future video. Goodbye.